I have one last announcement to make. I am going to retire this year. I'm going to retire in June of this year. When I was appointed to this church in 2012, I hoped that I would be able to retire from this church. I just didn't know when. Last summer, I received a pension statement, and I shared it with Libby. And it read, if you retire in 2019 with 40 years of service to the United Methodist Church, this is what your pension will be. And Libby said, 2019. That sounds like a long way off. And I said, yeah, you're right, it does. Let's see if we can move that up. The decision to retire this year is driven by Libby's illness. Multiple sclerosis is a horrible disease. Libby used a walker at home, but walked with a cane whenever we went out of the house back in 2012. But since then, she has developed the need to use a walker or her power chair to get around 24/7. 30 years ago, we built what we thought would be our retirement home, a log home in Fruitland Park, 5 miles from the Methodist Youth Camp in Lake County. Family needs change, don't they? And over the last several years, 2 of our adult children and a daughter-in-law have been living in our log home. There's no room at the inn. The home is accessible for Libby, but the acre lot is not. So we began consider building a small home in Tennessee. The summer heat in Florida is brutal for Libby. Heat makes all of her MS symptoms much worse. I have a sister that lives in East Tennessee in Jonesboro, and we have loved visiting there. So we began looking for land in East Tennessee. We found a half-acre lot in a little town of Chuckey near larger town of Greenville. They are building the first Publix in East Tennessee in Greenville, just in time for our arrival. There are 3 minor league baseball teams that play within 30 minutes of our property, and many, many little United Methodist churches to visit. We are nervous and excited about beginning this new chapter in our lives. I've asked our district superintendent, Gary Spencer, to write a letter to the district superintendents of the neighboring districts in Tennessee on my behalf so that I might become a resource to these little churches, to be a pulpit supply option. But I will not become a Tennessee volunteer fan. Won't do it. I've designed a simple house that will be completely accessible. My niece's husband will build the house for us. You've come to know how much I like simple. Last summer, I contacted our district superintendent, Gary Spencer, to tell him of my plans. See, this has been in the works for some time. I met with Gary in November to talk about the church and my plans for retirement. This is just surreal, for me. In December, I wrote a letter to the bishop formally telling him of my intentions. In January, I informed our staff parish relations committee, and within a week, Gary Spencer met with our committee and me. We decided that I would tell the congregation of my retirement plans this weekend. I'm very grateful to the members of the committee for keeping this announcement under wraps until tonight, and I know that is not an easy thing to do, keeping that from your spouses. And please, to you folks tonight, please don't get on your phone and text anybody before tomorrow morning, before 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. I realize some folks that are regularly at this service aren't here tonight, but please wait till after 11 tomorrow to let them know. I really think it's important for as many people as possible to hear it directly from me. Okay, if you will please honor that. Thank you. This month, the bishop and the cabinet have begun to meet regarding this year's appointment changes. In the United Methodist tradition, we embrace a sent rather than a called system. That means that the bishop and the cabinet send or appoint ministers to specific churches rather than local congregations interviewing and selecting their own ministers, like most denominations do. We are unique in that way. When I took my vows of ordination, I embraced the itineracy, meaning I would go wherever I was sent, and I have. So what does this mean for this church? You will receive a new pastor the first Sunday of July. My last Sunday, it is anticipated, will probably be the first Sunday of June. I will secure preachers for the 3 weekends between my leaving and the new pastor's arrival. 5 years ago, John Fisher was in the pulpit one Sunday, and I was here the very next. That was a difficult transition for everybody. With the outgoing minister retiring, instead of being appointed to another church, Gary Spencer suggested that we have that 3-week spacing window between the outgoing minister and the incoming minister. That will give the trustees time to prepare the parsonage for a new parsonage family, and time for the congregation to wrap its head around the change of pastors. The new pastor will be announced in April. Libby and I have absolutely loved being in ministry with you these last 5 years. It's hard to believe it's been 5 years. You've been so very loving, understanding, accepting, supportive, and encouraging. Especially want to say a word to those individuals and families that have joined this church while I've been the pastor. I'm talking to some of you here tonight. I remind you, you joined a church, not a pastor. Please understand that I've loved the fact that you've chosen to join this church while I have been the pastor. But it will be a huge mark against my ministry here if you drift away from this church, because there will be a change of pastors. Again, you joined a church, a wonderful church, not a pastor. The new pastor, whoever he or she might be, will do things differently from me. That is inevitable. And I have had a definite way of doing some things, haven't I? Please be just as loving and accepting and understanding of the new pastor as you have been of me. Please refrain from saying, "That's not the way Pastor Denny did it." In dealing with a change of pastors, I commend to you the memory of Ruby Wilcox, a saint of this church, who passed away last year and joined that great cloud of witnesses. Ruby joined this church when David Harris was the pastor. She loved David. When David was appointed to another church, John Fisher became the new pastor. Ruby wasn't too sure about him. But in time, she came to love John even more than David. And Ruby told me that. Then John was appointed to another church, and I became the new pastor of this church. Ruby had loved John and wasn't too sure about me. In time, I guess I wore her down. Ruby came to accept me, and she whispered to me on one visit, "I think I've come to like you even more than John. You will not be dishonoring me in the least if in time you can come to the conclusion, wow, I actually like the new minister better than old what's-his-name, or old Baldy, as someone in this church lovingly calls me." In fact, that is my prayer for each and every one of you. It is not about me. We've accomplished some noteworthy things together. We've laughed together. We've cried together. We've experienced some rich moments together. Libby and I will forever have wonderful memories of our deployment in MIMS. That word is there for skip. We talked about being deployed at different places in the military and in the ministry. I've told you on numerous times that I requested an appointment to a church in a setting just like MIMS. The bishop and the cabinet nailed it 5 years ago, as far as I was concerned. But come June, I will no longer be your pastor. Libby and I will forever be friends to you, and we will always hold this congregation fondly in our hearts. But I will no longer be your pastor. We will now have, all of us, a couple of months to wrap our heads around that. I think that is all that I have to say about that at this time, other than to say, God is good all the time. All the time, God is good.